Marshon Lattimore has been traded, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the New Orleans Saints on NFL trade deadline day has started the rebuild, and that began with the first domino, which was Marshon Lattimore being sent to the Washington Commanders. The trade is the New Orleans Saints get the Washington Commanders' third-round pick, their fourth-round pick, and it's sixth back from the John Ridgeway trade. Washington gets Marshon Lattimore and a Saints fifth. Okay, so this is a big deal because, one, it is a homegrown drafted Saint, and Marshon Lattimore, arguably the best cornerback in New Orleans Saints history and arguably a top 5 cornerback since he has entered the NFL, an absolute cornerstone to the Saints defense since he has been drafted in New Orleans. Now, it's also important because this tells you what the Saints are about to do for the next 2 years. And I'm going to explain the salary cap situation as best I can, explain the trade the best I can, and what it means for the rest of the Saints roster and kind of philosophy moving forward. So quick, let's talk about the trade. I think overall, the Saints got a lot. Like when you look at the trade and when you look at what the Saints have to do and their leverage and all of that, I think this is a good haul for Lattimore. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, we should have got a first, or wow, we should have got this, or we should have got that. You got to look at, when you look at trades and you try and value trades, you have to look at where the market was set. So there's usually a trade or something that happens before that sets the market value. And then you look at the leverage from the two teams. So two trades that make the most sense in comparison are the Darius Slay trade from 2020, which was Detroit received a third and a fifth, and the Eagles receive Darius Slay. Okay, so pretty similar. That's a pretty similar trade. Last year, L'Jarius Sneed was traded from the Chiefs to the Titans. In this situation, the Titans receive L'Jarius Sneed and a seventh. The Chiefs receive a seventh and a third. So basically a pick swap for the seventh, so Sneed for a third. So the fact that the Saints got more for Lattimore in this situation when their leverage is virtually zero is good. And the fact that it's all picks also tells you something else. It tells you that the Saints are ready to tear the roster down, because this is how they're going to have to get back to relevancy, is through tearing down the roster, getting rid of contracts, and building through the draft. Let me take you back in time, okay, to where this all began with the salary cap situation. The New Orleans Saints have Drew Brees, and Drew Brees and the Saints are getting nothing out of these seasons. They're having 7-9 season after 7-9 season after 7-9 season. So they decide that they're not getting enough results, so they need to bring in an influx of talent. They do this, okay? They bring in an influx of talent. Think about the Jerry's Bird kind of timeline, big, huge contracts, and they decide we're going to go all in on Drew Brees in this window, and we're going to push money down the road. Okay, so that starts the party. They continually do that up until 2016. 2016, they have a great draft class. Okay, Michael Thomas, Von Bell. Then 2017, they have an even better draft class. All right, Alvin Kamara. We all know how this goes. All right, we all know who gets drafted in the two draft classes. Trey Hendrickson, players like that. Okay, Marshon Lattimore. So Ryan Ramczyk. So those 2 years give you an influx of like 10 starters who are not only starters, but immediate impact all-pro level players playing on rookie contracts that are also like third-round structures. Most of these players aren't drafted in the first round. So not only do you have cheap contracts, you have the cheapest version of the cheap contracts. This does two things. One, it extends the window, okay? So now they're thinking, well, damn, now we've got 10 players, 11 players, 12 players who are absolutely sweet, and they're super cheap, and we have Drew Brees. So then this new window opens up, and they continually do this. So they continually say, F it, we're going to go sign whoever we can get to funnel in talent to combine with the veterans we have on the roster and the youth we have on the roster, and we'll try and win. And that's what they did. And they tried to win. Now, the problem with that was they believed that in 2016 and 2017, hitting on the draft, they believed that that was sustainable over a long period of time. So they basically, the bet was, we'll keep signing these big, or we'll keep pushing these contracts, and we'll keep aging veterans around. Think DeMario Davis, think Cam Jordan. We'll keep them around, and it will just supplement that by nailing the draft every year. Because the idea is if we can just replicate 2016, 2017, we're going to be Gucci. We're going to be good. Where a majority of our talent is on rookie cheap contracts, the other majority of the roster is on their older veteran players who we're keeping around to keep that core together. Well, two things happen. One, certain players start to reach the end of their contracts or the end of their careers naturally. That's the way that normally these players leave New Orleans. Trey Hendrickson reaches the end of his contract. Saints can't afford to pay him. He leaves. All right. Drew Brees reaches the end of his career. He retires. Like those are the ways that these contracts end, that they end. They don't cut players. They don't really trade players because of the way that the contracts are structured. So two things start happening. The Saints start missing in drafts. This is bad news bears, okay? The Saints start missing in drafts, so that promised restructure or the promised supplementation of the roster doesn't happen. We don't get the 2016. We don't get the 2017, all right? And then on the other end, like I said, Drew Brees retires. Sean Payton leaves. So now you have this convergence, this like meeting of no draft picks, and now you have no top-end talent in the veteran pool. And you're left with just kind of this middling roster, but a middling roster with the philosophy of we're financially trying to win now. So you get caught in this space that we've been in for 3 years of kind of a weak, medium-ish roster with a horrific salary cap situation to where you can't really fix it. So that's where we're at. Then the ultimate Hail Mary was, let's go sign Derek Carr. Let's go sign a $100 million 33-year-old quarterback to try and right the ship. Because if we can get Carr to play at a high level, we do still have enough talent right now. Alvin Kamara, Marshon Lattimore, Michael Thomas, DeMario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu. We still have enough talent. If Carr can lift it, maybe we can squeeze something out of this after all. Not the case. All right, so what do you do now? What do you do now? The answer is simple. You take it on the chin. And you're taking it on the chin right now to Marshon Lattimore. They restructured Lattimore's contract. Lattimore is pretty cheap, all things considered, for the Commanders. It's a $30 million dead cap hit. And, that part of the puzzle is the Fugazi part of the puzzle. That part of the puzzle is like, where does that come from? How do you pay it? Who the hell knows? What gets turned into cash? What gets turned into, how do you structure paying it off? Do you pay it off now? Do you pay it off in increments? Who the hell knows? Like the salary cap and the way that you can do that, there's so many loopholes. I'm certainly not a financial analyst. So all I can tell you is the New Orleans Saints will play on Sundays. They're not going to one day say, hey, we can't pay to turn the lights on, so the game is canceled. But when you do this, all right, when you make this trade and you do it exclusively for picks, which means you're not trying to get any contract relief, you're not trying to get any cash relief at all. This signals, one, we're going to try and rebuild this roster with cheap draft picks. We're stacking draft picks to try and increase the opportunity or increase the chance of us landing draft picks. That's the first thing this signals. The second thing is, if you are going to take the dead cap on the chin, you might as well do it all. And you might as well tear it all down. Now, remember how I mentioned that a lot of those contracts are structured for natural resolution, either retirements or a player just walking? We will see that in spades for the next 2 seasons. A majority of these contracts are set to naturally expire at 2026. Another handful are going to naturally expire with the player retiring, a la Ryan Ramczyk, a la Cam Jordan. So it's my estimation that from right now until 2026, you will see a ton of players walk and a ton of players retire. And any player that the Saints can get rid of, get capital back in this form of cheap draft capital, they're going to do it. And if it means eating $30 million dead cap, if it means ripping the Band-Aid off for the next 2 seasons, that's what's going to happen. I've had a lot of people in my comments, when I keep mentioning to trade Marshon Lattimore or that he will be traded, a lot of people say he can't be traded. I just had a comment that said, and no offense to Trace, but the comment said Trace from Chat Sports made a good point that Marshon can't be traded because he's $30 million of dead cap. So why would you trade him? Ladies and gentlemen, how many times do I got to say it? All this is Fugazi. All right? All this is Fugazi. It's not Fugazi to the point to where you have to ignore it, but how you maneuver the money, how you maneuver the dead cap, how you maneuver this, how you maneuver that, there's loopholes, all that stuff. So do not think because a player like Derek Carr is on some big contract, do not think that a player like Marshon Lattimore, who has a $30 million dead cap, don't think that those players can't be moved around. They will be moved around. 2 years, we're going to be bad for 2 years. It's going to be a whole bunch of get rid of the players we can get rid of. We're not going to have the money to sign anybody. So we're going to be playing with undrafted players. We're going to be playing with practice squad level players that you can sign on cheap deals. And we're going to be playing with whoever the hell we draft in 2025 and 2026. That's going to be the roster. The goal is, now this all sounds bleak, but we are hopefully going to line up. All right, we're going to have a curve where I've done this in 2 videos now. I'm busting out the pad. So we're going to have a curve where is this going to be a thing now where I start, but I need to get like a whiteboard. So we're going to have a curve where we're going to have a downswing. Okay. The downswing is going to be where we're getting rid of players, where we're dropping contracts, where we're playing with low level practice squad players, cheap players, whatever. We're going to do that. Simultaneously, we're stacking draft picks and we're drafting players for 2 years. The hope is that through 2 years of that and 2 drafts, we hit here and we either draft the player like Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, get the right coach, get the right draft picks, think 2016, 2017 drafts, think Joe Burrow, think Lamar Jackson, think Patrick Mahomes. You land the player, you find the franchise quarterback on a rookie deal, and then boom, you're financially stable, you have a jam-packed roster full of young talent, and you're on the upswing. Congratulations, you're in a winning window. The Philadelphia Eagles did this exact same thing after their Super Bowl. They win the Super Bowl with Foles. They drop contracts. They drop players. They do all that. They get bad. They're horrible. New coach, new coordinators, Jalen Hurts in the draft. Next thing you know, they're right back in the Super Bowl. So it happens. Doesn't sound fun. It might not be fun, but that's where we're at right now. That's where the Saints are. That's exactly what's happening. Don't get bogged down in 28 point whatever million dollars of dead cap. Don't get bogged down in, his contract, like Dennis Allen. I had someone else coming in before he got fired telling me that, Dennis Allen's under contract until 2027. He can't, he's under contract. And I had to explain, like, every single contract has an out year in it. And when you have out years, Dennis Allen's was in 2025. And look what happened. So I always use Cliff Kingsbury as an example. I know that coaches don't affect the salary cap, but it shows you the philosophy of front offices and the philosophy of how things can change. Cliff Kingsbury signs an enormous contract in Arizona, long-term deal. He's supposed to be the coach of the future. He's a young guy. They signed Kyler Murray around the similar time. Next thing you know, 6 months later, Kingsbury's out. organizations, front offices, ownerships can change on a dime. They do. No pun intended with the dime. And, so all these players, Derek Carr included, Marshon Lattimore included, I'm doing this in the middle of trade deadline day. I would not be surprised at all if Chase Young's next, because Chase Young is a 1-year rental kind of thing anyways. He's an edge rusher. Teams like the Lions could use an edge rusher. I know they just traded for one, but you never know for a cheap rental. There's a lot of teams that'll go get a rotational guy. We saw the 49ers do it last year. So now one more thing I'll say is how fast things can change. A good example is Washington. Last year, Washington are sellers. They're firing their coaches. They just traded Chase Young. They do all that. They get rid of bad contracts. They traded Montez Sweat was another one, right? They traded him to Chicago. You get rid of some contracts. You get rid of some coaches. You build through the draft. You get the right quarterback. You get the right coach. You get the right coordinators. 1 year later, Washington goes from sellers to they're 6-2, and they're buyers of the deadline. So even though I keep saying that this is more than likely a 2-year rebuild, you're one draft pick away. You're one Jaden Daniels away. You're one Sean McVay away. You're one Dan Campbell away. Okay, so that's the situation right now. It's complicated, but it is what it is. Let me know in the comments below what you think. We wish Marshon the best, and we wish the New Orleans Saints the best. In this 2-year rebuild, we'll be covering it the whole way. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.